Metaphor ReFantazio, a new title by Atlas and Studio Zero, which is made up of past Persona developers, feels initially familiar. The primary formula that made the Persona series so famous and so special is entirely on display here, blending fantastic combat and dungeon crawling with a life simulation focused on spending free time on relationship building and personal betterment. When we first saw Metaphor ReFantazio, the trailer grabbed me immediately. It looked recognizable, wrapped up in a new skin, and was an adventure not set in high school, but lifted and dropped into a fantastical iteration of the Dark Ages. It lands this concept, but it is also so much more than that. The flow is similar, grounding both sides of the experience in a daily calendar system with deadlines and choices. However, Metaphor ReFantazio quickly creates its identity using the successful Persona formula. Alice has a fantastic new title on its hand, one that JRPG fans will have tons to sink into. The adventure is dark and twisted, leaving the halls of a Japanese high school for the first time. The cast is nuanced and well written, and also really well voice acted, dealing with loss staining their pasts. The new combat is one of the most fluid job systems I've ever played and introduces archetypes. It's exciting and prompts plenty of freedom within the story while encouraging exploration. While Metaphor ReFantazio may first feel like Persona X Final Fantasy XVI, that idea is quickly thrown out the window and entirely becomes its own. It's an excellent and tight package with fantastic combat, an intriguing narrative, creative visual design, and a must-play for any Persona or JRPG fan. One of the first things that sets Metaphor apart from its sister series is its tone and narrative. Feeling more like Shin Megami Tensei or Final Fantasy XVI, Metaphor ReFantazio puts you in the shoes of an unnamed protagonist as they get swept up in a massive conspiracy. The king is murdered, his son is cursed, and his assassin, Louis, makes a play for the crown. What follows is a massive story that takes you all over the continent as the hero joins the competition for the crown. It's stiff, with a controlling Church of Sanctism, the Kingslayer Louis, and many others staking their claim for the crown. After the regicide and Louis moves for control, the royal castle shakes, lifting into the sky. Underneath, a giant face resembling the dead king, his words simple: whoever the public deems to be the next ruler shall be so. It is a popularity contest, with the top contestants protruding in rock on the giant floating stone. The Sanctus Church, trying to hold on to power, decides the following steps: a royal tournament determining the next ruler. The countrywide competition begins, and your job is to get into first place and hold on to it. The prince is cursed and needs a cure, along with a pathway to return to the throne. Only you and your friends can stop the machinations of Louis, the church, and other would-be rulers. Anxiety runs rampant across Uchronia, manifesting in your allies, the general populace, and even in battle. It's a central theme that all the characters struggle with in some way, shape, or form, always present, even if unseen. These are terrifying and uncertain times in Uchronia, as the destabilization caused by the loss of the king spreads throughout the country. Even in battle, characters can well up with the anxiety if they're missing attacks or performing badly. If Persona 5 was about finding freedom in the shackles of modern society, Metaphor ReFantazio is about learning to live with, accept, and overcome your anxiety. The narrative is fantastic, rife with political intrigue as the various players make their moves. There are plenty of twists and turns, surprising moments always grounded in character rather than exclusively spectacle. The country is torn apart not only as different supporters for the various would-be kings, but also deeply divided by religion and race. The Sanctus Church feels a little too familiar, an overbearing and loud religious body hell-bent on persecuting anyone that doesn't align with its own goals and beliefs, their followers even more so. The protagonist is from a race of people called the Elda, who are looked at as lesser and treated as such by much of the population. Other religions and races are trampled on by the ruling class, with bodies littering the backstreets of sprawling cities, as those with less literally die in the streets. Nothing looks wrong, especially in the few spaces in front of the Grand Church. Our hero and his friends are out to bring equality, believing that support and care for one another should transcend religion or race. While it's heavy-handed and not at all subtle in its approach, there are plenty of heart-wrenching and beautiful moments, firmly rooted in the belief of a brighter and more equal future. The cast is similarly well written and easy to care about, as they all carry significant trauma in their own brand of anxiety. Stoll, a lordling from a destroyed city, is out to avenge his family and home. Hulkenberg is a royal knight who carries the weight of past mistakes, blaming herself for the country's current state. Those are just your first two party members, with the rest of the cast similarly steeped in loss, grief, anxiety, and the eventual hope for a happier day. One of my standouts is Heismei, a member of the bat-like Yugi tribe, dealing with the loss of a child. Every character I met is compelling, and I had a tough time deciding on who to spend time with, as each one of their stories drew me in and did not let go. This extends to many of the supporting cast and other players. Louis, the main villain, isn't just evil for the sake of it. He has his own story, compelled by a dream of equality, but chooses a much more radical and different approach. There are side characters that I still think about, with some of their stories indeed staying with me. Metaphor ReFantazio's gameplay takes on two forms, split between dungeon crawling and combat and day-to-day life simulation, but more tightly tied together than before. The calendar ticks on daily, separating each day into afternoon and night. Anyone who's played a Persona title will know exactly what they're getting into. Do you spend time with an ally, learning more about their story, potentially unlocking a new archetype? Do you focus on upgrading one of your core 5 personality traits, all of which are important on their own right? Do you head to a dungeon to complete quests? Any of the above consumes time, with the dungeon being an all-day activity. It's a choice that needs to be constantly made and balanced, as every aspect affects the other. If you spend time with an ally, you dive deeper into their backstory and motivations. While some past Persona titles had varying levels of quality to their characters, and I'm looking at you, Mishima, each one of their characters and metaphor is compelling in its own right. As you rank up the relationships, you gain various rewards, such as new archetypes and other boons to help gameplay. This is the primary way to discover new archetypes, as different characters unlock new ones to use in battle. You can also get boons that help outside of combat, like reducing shop prices. While there isn't any romance, I didn't really notice the lack of it, and I didn't miss it. Most relationships will also require you to have your personality stats at a certain level at some point, meaning that as much as you want to spend time with someone, your personality should not be ignored. One of the best parts about Metaphor is the Gauntlet Runner, a massive legged vehicle that carries the party around the country. Once you choose a location to travel to, it takes time, ranging from just one day to a few. The Gauntlet Runner has a ton of stuff to do on board, ranging from activities like cooking items that can be helpful in combat, to permanently raising your HP or MP, along with spending time with your allies. Some relationship levels can only be raised on the runner, making it necessary to consider where and when you travel. Your personality can also be raised significantly here, as you spend time with allies to increase their relationship level a bit and add also many points to your traits. It connects to personality and allies more meaningfully than ever before, removing the needless hangouts needed to boost relationships slightly without anything else found in Persona games. The Gauntlet Runner also limits the activities available as well, as the game flows better than before. Rather than having big chunks of time with dungeons in between, the smaller bits of travel time are sprinkled between story and combat, allowing moments to breathe in between. They never overstayed their welcome, allowing for a few days of bonding, personality building, and stat boosting amid all the conflicts. There are still the bigger chunks, but it was nice to have these smaller bits interspersed throughout. Metaphor also offers a brand new combat and job system called Archetypes. While there are still badass moments when a character unlocks their archetype, the system's fluidity allows for much more experimentation. Instead of the Velvet Room and Igor, players meet Mor, a mysterious character trapped in academia, a room which he has no memory of. What he remembers is his pursuit of knowledge related to archetypes. Speaking to him allows you to spend mag, which you will get from battles and quests, to unlock new archetypes. The main character starts as a seeker, using wind magic and slight healing abilities, but can pivot to any other job class. Any character can actually switch and level jobs, along with carrying over skills across classes, meaning you have a lot of freedom to build out each combatant as you see fit. My protagonist ended up becoming a healer, blending in long-range piercing attacks from the back row with heavy heals. Thankfully, the fight doesn't end if the protagonist goes down anymore either. On the other hand, Stoll, for example, starts off as a stalwart warrior, dealing significant physical damage. I decided to invest much of his time as a mage, bringing up a host of magical attacks to balance out his physical moves. There are over 25 different archetypes that can be studied, with some requiring specific levels of other archetypes to become unlockable. It ends up being an incredibly fluid and dynamic system, and while you can't switch archetypes mid-battle, you can quickly swap between them as you're outside of it. Combat itself is fantastic, feeling similar to Persona and Shin Megami Tensei with some fun twists. You can attack enemies with a simple hit and dodge in the overworld, and doing so enough will grant a starting strike as you enter turn-based combat. Characters can be positioned in the front row, where physical attacks deal more damage and defenses are lowered, or in the back row, where the reverse is true. Each turn rotates through the characters, as each side has a certain amount of moves that they can make. Hitting an enemy costs an action, but hitting a weakness will lower the cast by half. You can get an entire extra round if every character can hit a weakness. Archetypes also have synergy moves and stronger attacks that cost multiple actions depending on the archetypes available on the field. Having 2 magic-based archetypes may let you hit more enemies for more damage, while a physical attacker and caster can imbue elemental damage to a strike. These synergies change dramatically depending on the archetypes on the field, so deciding which archetypes are used affects both the characters and the party composition. Dungeons are all handcrafted this time. The procedurally generated reminders of mementos for Persona 5 and dungeons from Persona 3 are gone. While the main dungeons are top-notch, the side dungeons are just okay, not particularly memorable in design or aesthetic. They're pretty basic but offer great rewards and treasure to find, along with breaking up the free time with some bespoke areas to explore. Knowing weaknesses is incredibly useful, as it allows for more dynamic planning. Informants are available in every city, and seeking them out before heading out is necessary, as they sell information about various targets, locations, and enemies. Their information saved me on more than one occasion, as even on normal difficulty, I got destroyed in a good handful of fights. For example, one early side boss in a dungeon kept kicking my teeth in. Finding the informant, I learned that they had elemental weaknesses, but also got in range at the sight of a staff. I initially went in with a mix of a magic knight and a seeker, but found my seeker wasn't really doing much over the course of the fight. I switched archetypes and brought in 2 mages and a knight, wary of the fact that I was bringing in 2 staffs. I used the knife to soak damage and distract the boss, while had both mages firing off spells from the back row that I knew the boss was weak to, making it a much more manageable encounter. On top of the informants, each city you travel to has many different things to do. Between activities that boost personalities, side quests to pick up, allies to spend time with, shops to buy new gear, and more, there are plenty of ways to spend your time. The calendar and day-night cycle also play here, with significant activities or hangouts being limited to certain days or times. Shops have sales on Idols Day and at the end of the month, while weather impacts travels and dungeons, the ebb and flow of the world becoming more apparent with time. One of the best changes Metaphor makes to the Persona formula is that once an ally is available to hang out with, they'll be available every day. You don't have to worry about specific days that limit the character's availability, instead accounting more for the personality trait thresholds. It makes each day feel more impactful, knowing that if you go to a dungeon, the confidant will still be available in the next day. It opens up the calendar without relieving the stress, and it is now more focused on the larger picture and tighter deadlines and flow instead of a specificity of a given day. It's a fantastic change that I hope follows forward in the series. Graphically, Metaphor is solid. While it's not the prettiest game, it does a ton in its art style and UI to make the experience feel unlike anything else. Occasionally during your travels, the gang stops at various photo stops worldwide that can easily be breathtaking. Massive vistas and sweeping views drenched in colors that are just gorgeous. The cities are beautiful and complex, each altogether different than the one before. While the grand capital looks ornate and grand, the quieter streets of Martira paint a much more solitary picture. The actual dungeon design is less impressive, with the side dungeons specifically being a series of hallways with bland walls and boring designs. The UI also does a lot of the heavy lifting, as the painting-esque screens flow from one to the other, each with a unique visual language that complements one another. The style might be too much for some, but it elevates the otherwise simple menus, adding a depth of flavor and personality. Performance is also uneven throughout. I played on Xbox Series X, and Metaphor feels like it runs at a relatively consistent frame rate, but struggles to stabilize in bigger cities and at certain moments. Thankfully, I didn't encounter any bugs, so it became even more disappointing. The inconsistent frame rate was a nagging issue made to stand out even more. It never took me out of the experience, but it was noticeable. This seems to be an issue with recent Atlus titles, making it feel like a lingering issue due to the engine. Metaphor ReFantazio is an incredible experience, taking the foundation built by Persona and making it entirely its own. The characters and narrative are monumental, grabbing hold of you and not letting go. It took me about 60 hours to roll credits, with plenty of side content finished along the way. I was able to max out every relationship and every personality trait, coming down to the wire to do so. The archetype system and combat are fluid and full of creativity, allowing each player to have an entirely different squad that feels entirely their own. It's a beautiful and prosperous world, one that I hope that we return to in the future. It is a fantastic adventure that is full of heart, looking for light even in the dark. Here's hoping this is the start of a brand new series for Atlus. Thanks for watching.